And it's terrible because for pretty much half of that kit and half the weight to even quarter of the weight, I could probably make a kit that is more useful than that and even more compact and more affordable, and it can also prolong stuff. But then when you start trying to have a discussion or trying to bring things, they try to attack your points of like, oh well, no, that's how we doing things in the hospital and stuff. And this is the other point. Yes, I understand the need in a hospital for a one-time use only, because we're talking about thousands of people that pass through it, and through the years would have shown that disease like Hep C, Hep B, AIDS, and all those was a very burdenful hospital. So disposable was the cheapest way to deal with this and decrease the number of infection that goes into it. But in self-reliance medicine, you're not dealing with 1,100 people. You're not dealing with millions of people. You're dealing with your family. You're dealing with your spouse. You're dealing with whoever is around you. We're talking maybe 10, 20 people if you're a big thing. Maybe a mini village if you're whatever that your connections are. So we're talking about material that's going to be reused in between each other. So that means that you guys will probably already have whatever you have. So why are we talking that we need to dispose of those material and stuff? And then people give you big numbers like 200 gauze. Well, 200 gauze won't even last you a week or 2 weeks if you have a major wounds that have about moderate to severe drainage. It won't even last you, because for each dressing that you do about 2 or 3 times a day, because this is what happened with gauze, and that's why I talk about 21st century dressings in the past, is because those dressings can last for weeks. So that means if I have 4 dressings, that means I can be 4 wounds or for 4 weeks. But 200, that's about 5 or 6, that's about 20 dressings a day that you need to change. 5 times, that's 100. So that you have 2 weeks. And plus, a wound can take up to 2 to 3 weeks before it can heal. So your 300 package of gauze, gone. That's 200. That's huge. That's about a stack like this that is gone for one wound. And you just started about. But yet they'll sell you this kit. They'll put the big names and stuff, and they say, yes, it's for this, and they put the self-reliance on it, or the disaster, and it makes it cool. And then on the other ones, they'll teach you about intravenous again. And the problem with intravenous is I don't even understand how you're going to do it. And I'm going to do another video pretty soon on fluid resuscitation, and I'm going to talk exactly why I'm against fluid. And I do start IV all the time, and in the hospital makes totally sense. But every technique that we learn, everything that we do, we have to put them in context of what we're going to use them. If I'm in the middle of the field, or if I don't have electricity, or if I don't have continuous supplies all the time, I cannot just reuse, go with the tactics that works when I have unlimited supplies, unlimited economy, and in an economy with many patients. It's a different technique. It's different things. We're talking about a different situation, and also we're talking about different knowledge over here. But yeah, they'll tell you, oh yes, stuff, and it seems like it's the cool element of learning how to suture, how to do this, when you can learn how to do dressing, which every wound you can close in secondary closure. Some will take longer if you don't closure for sure, but if you learn about the technique versus the sutures, makes more sense to close in a secondary closure than to wear in primary closure, because primary closure, you can screw it up. You can do bad things to it. Secondary closure doesn't mean that you cannot screw up or whatever, but you can still do things. But because they have that BS of professionals that for them it's easy because they do it all the time, then it seems like, oh yeah, well, we'll teach you that. And it's true. I mean, it's not that hard of a technique, but don't forget that for every technique that you have other knowledge that have to come. And again, just like my example I was talking about, to start a fire, it's not very hard to use a ferrous rod. It's not very hard to use a lighter or something, but what you need to know, it's not the technique on how to start it, but what preparation that comes in, what kind of tender you need to use, what you do if your tender is wet, if what you do, and this is the thing. So the technique of starting a fire is not complicated. It's all the things that you have in front of you to make it successful. That is the difference. Same thing with medicine. Everything that you're going to do, every technique that you're going to apply is different. There's the technique comes with the knowledge and the knowledge base, and that's why we go to school for 4 or 10 years before we can do stuff. Blood pressure, it was my first year of nursing. I had to do, I think, about a 4 or 5 hours of course on how to learn how to do it, and then after that we had to practice on each other for pretty much every day for months and months and then after that we went to the school to practice it so that we can have the art. For what? So that we can, when the numbers tell us, it's not just about getting the number 140 or 50. Okay, I got the number, so what? So what does it tell me? So this is the importance, that what you do with the numbers, what you can manage with this. What does this number means in this condition and the other condition? 1/10/20 can be normal for someone or can be abnormal for another person. So the number himself doesn't mean anything. It's the knowledge associated to the technique to put. Auscultation, the same thing. So the whole point of what I'm trying to say basically is that be careful about the things that are outside right now, because a lot of people are selling you illusions. They're selling you things that seems like, oh, okay, I'm going to go to this 8-hour course, or I'm going to buy this kit and I'll be good. Put it in the corner and that's it. And because we cannot apply the same thing in our survival techniques, nobody would buy a Ferris rod, put it in the corner and say, okay, I'm good, or put whatever, like a bow drill and say, okay, I have my kit, I'll put it in the side and that's it. Nobody would do that in survival. So how come we're doing it in medicine? How come we're doing it in the medical part when you're taking hygiene? And this is what my issue becomes to, is that it becomes an issue of that. It's not so much the person, and this is what you're thinking about. If I affect my own survival because I didn't do something, okay, it was my own fault, I took the blame, I'm taking. When you're taking care of other people, or when people rely on you to be taken care of, because most likely because you're doing all those courses or trying to do this, is because people will rely. They'll say, you're the medical person. And when somebody will turn, and this person is someone that you love, the loved one, that is someone that it's your wife, your partner, your mother, whoever, that's going to turn to you and said, do you remember 2 or 3 years ago? Because this is the other thing too, that when you do this course, then how you gonna remember all these things if you don't practice, if you don't have the art, if you don't go through things like that? It's not just about taking a course and that's it, or buying a kit and putting it in the corner. You need to know what you're doing, because when somebody will turn around and request that you're doing something, I guarantee you that if you don't have the answer, you'll be crumbled. And I had it sometime in my career where sometime I would have a patient in front of me and I didn't know the answer. And it was not somebody that I cared or I knew about. It was somebody I just met or something. And yet it was the fact it hits you. Sometimes you barely even can sleep because of that. And imagine now that you add to this that is someone that you know and you wish you would have known what it is. But it's too late after that to say, well, I did that 8 hours and it didn't work. So please, 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 before you sign for those things, or before you spend any money, or before you buy any kit, sit down and see if it's the thing that you need. Sit down and think processly. Would that make sense that if I go for a because I know also a lot of people out there, money is short, and a $300 and $400 is pretty expensive. It's pretty out there. So be careful about the money that you spend and things. And if you're gonna do this, might as well just buy books then, and it will probably be cheaper, and you're probably gonna get as much information and even more, because they'll be able to go back to it. But if you go for a course and that's it. But if you buy a book and you buy how to approach, and that's why when Nietzsche, this is why there's a lineup like this. when you learn 8 hours to teach you how to be a robot. Why? Because of that. Because you don't have enough knowledge, or you don't have enough experience to approach different problems. So when they're going to tell you, you have a breathing, you put pressure, you raise and stuff, and call an ambulance. Why? Because that's what they want. They want you to do boom, 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 because of the stress situation. Also, don't forget that you can be calm now and learning things and seeing everything, but when the stress goes and your fatigue and everything, a lot of the memory that you're going to have will be shaked off, or will go, and that's where books sometimes could be even more interesting, especially if the ones with the protocols, they have the algorithm, because the algorithm is somebody with the knowledge put it together to help you take decisions, and this is what it comes to down. And that's why I did a previous video, I was talking about how EMT, so emergency medical technician, pretty much, if you're really serious about this, should be about the minimum of what you should look at. Because in the EMT, depending on the program again and where you are, but they'll learn how to do some medication, some intramusculars and stuff. They'll learn how to give some medication. They'll learn. They'll even do some clinicals in hospitals where they spend time. I know on our side over here they do that. So they spend time in the emergencies with us, and they see sick patient, what's a sick, what non-sick, and then they do also time in the ambulance. And this helps them develop not only their knowledge base because of the course that they did, not only their techniques because they get to practice them, but also they slowly get a little bit of their art, and they get to be able to do a little bit of the practice and to apply what they're learning. So please, 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 before you do anything, before you go and spend some money on this stuff, spend the time to ask, is that appropriate for me? Does that make sense? And don't let yourself be a victim of the market of illusions, where they're going to try to sell you stuff because it sounds cool. Oh, I'm going to learn how to start an IV, or I'm going to learn how to do stuff. There's a ton of YouTube videos that you can even learn how to do that, but it doesn't make sense to start an IVs on someone in the hospital because you don't have the resource for it. Doesn't make sense. A lot of things, like to take a blood pressure, you don't even know what the blood pressure is going to tell you. Sure, you can have it, the number, but what does the number would tell you? This is what, or again, if you don't have any product that you cannot reproduce, what's the purpose of having them? So if you have gauze or dressing and you rely on that source and you lose that source, how are you going to do? So, and you don't know, your situation can happen in 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. You can be, so if you're in the 6 months, you're 200, it's been long gone, and now that's you bought the kids. Okay. So now you just spend a lot of the money. Yeah, you could have invested in some other stuff, or learning different ways to do things, or to reproduce your stuff, and to be able to regenerate. And again, I'm not saying I'm an expert. I'm not an expert at all. I'm a knowledgeable person in the field, and I'm a student as much as actually John Campbell on his website. He has this quote. Never a master, always never a master, always a student. And I love that approach. And again, because I always try to get better, and that's why I always put links to some of the stuff that when I discuss about something, so that you can go and look at it, so that you can look and have your own judgment. Does that make sense? Because if it doesn't make sense, please write to me, write it back, have discussion. I have no problem with this, and if I'm wrong, I'll go back on the camera and I'll admit it. But I'm on an open mind on that subject, and when I go and throw something on the internet or on YouTube, I do my research before, and I read about things, and I ask myself, is that okay? But again, like, we're all fireable, we can all be wrong. Let's remain open mind to it. Let's not close our doors to people that are judgmental, not judgmental, but brings things to us, because this is how we improve, and this is how we can improve this self-reliance, and this is how we can get better at it. Anyway, wanted to do this little bit of rant and Talk to you soon.